In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how I would finish up my drawing of a still life with the objects that have ellipses. And here I go. Well, the first thing I did was I stepped back from my drawing, and after I laid it out, and I discovered that the axis for the wine glass was off. So what I'm doing is I'm working on fixing that. So it was a little bit crooked, and actually I will come back to the glass again and slide the base over a little bit more to the left. But this is me and my process of working on this wine glass and getting it a little bit more accurate. So there I'm, measuring. Did you see that? I was measuring the distance between the sides of the axis. So if the axis is going through the center of the object, each side should be an equal distance from that. There I go again, just checking things out, measuring them, and I discovered that that side, the left side, had to come in a little bit. So after you finish laying out your drawing, you're going to go through it and you're going to want to correct anything that's a little bit off. Now, you see my little jerky little motions there? That's because I did speed up the video. This is twice as fast as I normally drew. So this video is around 16 minutes or so. It took me a little over half an hour to clean this drawing up, not including breaks. So now I'm still working on the base of the wine glass there. I made the bottom edge a little darker because that's where it's sitting on the table. And I'm just working on that curve down there and fixing that edge. Oh, I decided that it would be a good idea to use 2B pencils, a lighter pencil for the objects in the background. And I stay away from the H pencils and the HB pencils when I do my demonstrations, otherwise you wouldn't see them. What good would they do? But then for the objects in the foreground, I'm switching back to my favorite ebony pencil. Love that pencil. It's such a nice, rich, dark, and it does so many things when it's sharpened. It can be lighter, it can be darker. So if you don't have an ebony pencil, 4B works really well. Since my cup was my unit of measure, and since it's right up there in the front, that's going to be one of my focal points. Now, yeah, it's a cup, not real exciting, but I am going to make the edges a little bit darker and clean them up a little bit. Now I'm working on the handle and getting that curve down. And you might want to look at how I'm holding the pencil to work on this drawing, clean it up, and work on the lines. I am holding it the same way we would if we were writing or printing, right? So I'm gripping the pencil closer to the point, and that gives me a lot more control. You can also see that sometimes I'll do like a kind of a clear line and I'll pull it around, but many times I'll do a little sketchy line just, with a series of strokes. So you'll see me working in a couple different ways with the way I draw my lines. All right, now I'm going to start working on the lid to that canister, and I wanted to create, it has a little lip on it, and I thought I wanted to create that. And then I noticed it has this really cool, like, metallic light and dark thing, and then going on, and then it has these swirls around the middle, and then I got a little carried away. And then I thought, oh, I'm not sure about that. I mean, this is supposed to be a line drawing, and here I am drawing swirls, and now it seems like my focal point is becoming this lid. And I thought, I don't think that's a good thing. So I decided to take all that out. So I went back in with my kneaded eraser and just erased it. I left kind of a shadow drawing in there to suggest the fact that it had that. There I added the line to the edge of the table. You can see that on the bottom, on the side on the right. All right, so I've moved over to the canister, And again, I want to vary my focus. I don't want everything to be crisp and clear. I want the objects in the background to be there, but I want the drawing looser on the back objects and a little bit lighter too. So working on that canister, which has these kind of like an etched squares on it, and I really enjoyed drawing that. Um, Plus, it had all those ellipses in there. Okay, so I have now moved over to the French press, which will definitely become my focal point because it's the most intricate, it's got the most details, it's the most interesting object, I think, that I've got in my still life. So now I shifted back. Sometimes I'll jump around a little bit. Something will catch my eye, like on that canister, like, oh yeah, I gotta clean up that, left corner a little bit. Okay, now I'm back to fixing the line, and now I'm drawing around the edges of the reflections. And we're going to do a drawing where we're working with shading reflections on metallic and glass objects. And I was just thinking how fun this French press coffee pot would be to do a drawing that was shaded. Anyway, that's what some of those lines are, and you can do that too. If you see shadows, you can trace around the edges of shadows. Here I'm just cleaning up the edge of that top, little bulb there that operates the plunger. And let's see, what am I up to now? Yes. Okay, so a lot of times you'll probably see me. A lot of times I tend to work from the top down. Not always, but a lot. What you want to do when you're working on these drawings is you want to repeat your darks throughout the drawing to give it a sense of flow and a sense of unity. Okay? Now, that's like a major statement, what I just said there. So I'm going to say it again. You're going to repeat your darks throughout your composition so that your drawing has a sense of flow. Whoever's looking at it, their eye will flow from one area to the other and not get hung up. Okay? So that's what you don't want. In your drawing, you don't want an area where somebody's eye just like stops. You want everything to have a wonderful flow. Okay, anyway, working on that center line there of that little plunger thing, and then I got too dark, and then it got too thick, so you see I erased it, and I fixed it. And that's really what drawing's all about. You try something, you put it down, see if it works. Doesn't work, and use your intuition. If you put something down and think, oh, I don't know about that, guess what? It's not working. Change it. Fix it. Okay? That's what you've got to do. So now I'm just kind of working on, there's like these metal, it's like a metal stand that the glass coffee pot sits in. So I'm pulling those lines down, thinking about the drawing that I showed you by Chip Foose, his masterful use of how he pulls his lines across so straight and so clean. And that comes with practice, with a lot of practice, you can draw those lines nice and straight and clean. The more you practice, the easier, the easier drawing is going to get for you, and the more fun, too. So here I'm cleaning up some of my lines. I'm working on that, another little metal bar there. They're really kind of like these flat slats that connect to that top ring. Now, as I'm looking at it, and I realized this later, that top ring around the French press is a little too flat. Some of you may have noticed that. And if you also look at the upper right part of the lid of the French press, the upper right, yeah, it needs to come down a little bit. And you'll see me taking care of that later. But right now, as I'm engaged in the drawing process, I am not judging my drawing. I'm not like kind of using my analytical skills to figure out what works and what I need to fix. I'm just so into the drawing. You'll have to actually literally step back or lean back in order to judge your drawing. Now I'm working on that. There's like this this little, that's the press. That's what it's called. And so there's yet another ellipse that's like a little metal, a circular ellipse that presses the coffee down, and it has a spring around it. Excuse me. And I've been thinking about how am I going to draw that spring, and here's how I'm drawing it. So I really looked at it. I looked at those curves, and I realized that those curves, of course, are in perspective too. They curve in one direction, and then they get to where your eyes are, and then they start curving in the other direction. So I was kind of after that. I drew guidelines first so that I could see those curves as I was working on them. And there I just got a little bit darker underneath here. I'm working on the plunger there. Okay, now the video stopped and then restarted again. And this is after I took a step back, looked at my drawing, and realized that the right side of the top of the French press had to come down a little bit. So that was me fixing that. And then in order to fix it, I had to adjust the little spout. And that's what I did. I adjusted the angle of the spout. And so still working with that curve a little bit. And then the other thing I discovered was I really needed to bring the bottom of that, the base of the wine glass, that had to go out further to the left. So I'm shifting that. You know, you saw me erase that and kind of move it out a little bit further to the left. Now, I discovered all this at the point where my memory card wouldn't store any more video, and I literally had to stop. Okay, and I stopped, I took a step back. This is where I am fixing that curve. And so that curve actually has to curve down a little bit. Now, one thing I did to check my drawing is really kind of funny. I turned upside down. I held my head upside down, and I looked at the drawing that way. And sometimes I have two tricks, and a lot of artists do this. If you look at your drawings that you're working on upside down, or if you look at your drawing in a mirror, if you hold it up to a mirror, then you can catch anything that looks a little bit awkward or anything that looks a little bit off. So I would encourage you to do that. So I didn't stand on my head or anything. I just kind of, bent over at the waist and looked at it upside down. And it was good. I was like, oh yeah, those two curves, they're off a little bit. Got to fix those right in there. Okay, so now I also discovered that that part of that lid back there just had to be a little bit thicker. And I was just fixing the rim of that lid a little bit. And I'm purposefully leaving the objects that are in the back, the canister, the lid, the wine glass, lighter and looser. And then I'm really working up my details on that French press coffee pot. Okay, so now finally, kind of on the last leg of this drawing here, I'm going to clean up the handle for that coffee pot. And it's got kind of neat contraption there. There was a little bolt on the top, and then I'm working with this curve of the handle. Seeing how that curves around a little bit. And just fixing the curve with my kneaded eraser. I've been using my kneaded eraser for this whole drawing just because I didn't feel like dealing with any of the crumbs that the vinyl eraser makes. And I also, on purpose, I'm not erasing my my axes, for the ellipses, or the central axes for all the objects. I'm not erasing my sighting lines between the objects, those angles between the tops of the objects. I'm going to leave those all there in the drawing. So what this is called is varying your finish, creating a focal point, an area that has a lot more detail than other areas. But also, with the drawing, you need to have it balanced. You need to have a sense that everything is flowing well. And with this drawing, what happened was when I stepped back, I discovered that all like the visual weight was so heavy on that French press, because I really loved drawing it. I got into all the detail that I had to go back in the drawing, and I spent just a couple minutes um, working on balance. So that's what you're going to see at the very, very end of the drawing. I thought I was pretty much done at this point, and then I stepped back and I was like, you know what? It needs a little something extra to balance it. So I looked at that coffee mug, I looked at the shapes of the shadows, I drew some outlines around the shapes of the shadows, and then I thought I'd fix the handle a little more detail there. And again, I'm just trying to balance uh, the French press. Then I thought the shapes of the shadows were really cool, so I started outlining the shapes of the shadows. I like the kind of swirling motion of them, and realizing that this is supposed to be a line drawing. I'm trying not to do any shading right now. It's hard to hold back. But then at the very end, I'm using some very, very light hatching. Hatching is where we're going to be learning about that soon. There I go. You're going in one direction. It's diagonal. It's a series of strokes in one diagonal direction, and I just felt that this drawing needed a little bit more weight to finish it up. And there it is. I'm going to just call that drawing finished.